Win big in 2024 with Team Sync from RotoBaller. Import your fantasy teams and sync your leagues. Get customized tools and tailored advice for your specific rosters and scoring settings, including live recommendations from the Live Draft Assistant, Free Agent Finder, and Lineup Optimizer. Sync an unlimited amount of NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL fantasy teams from all of the major fantasy platforms. Get a discount for any premium pass using my promo code Knuckler. Just visit rotoballer.com/radio and start rotoballing like a boss. This podcast is also brought to you by Parlay Play Fantasy Sports. Use my referral code RotoBrady. Get that sweet, sweet deposit bonus. They got paid contests, free contests, paid contests coming to a state near you. They're giving out bonuses and slashing lines all day long. Check that out. That's a fun platform. And what is up, everybody? This is Brady Grove bringing you episode 143 of RotoBaller's official MMA podcast, Tap That. And we've got UFC Vegas 94 this weekend.
Break out the red panties.
Follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady. We got Octagon and KSW, Cage Warriors coming up this weekend, and some major boxing events, including Jake Paul versus Mike Perry. For my picks on all of that stuff, major MMA and boxing event stuff on UFC Fight Pass, follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady. Follow the podcast at Tap That MMA Podcast on Facebook, YouTube, and Spotify. Come out to the RotoBaller MMA Discord on Saturday. Let's talk DFS and sports betting strategy for UFC Vegas 94. Check out my weekly MMA DFS value picks article coming out on Fridays. That's something I've been doing for the last few weeks. It's a lot of fun. And we got a lot of interlude episodes coming up with people from the college and spring football world. As you know, that's something that I write gambling content for RotoBaller during the UFL season. The indoor and arena seasons are still going on, and the UFL just had their college draft, so there's a lot of guys on the move. Anyway, those are interlude episodes to look out for coming up. Last week at UFC Denver, bouncing back a little bit. And on a super weird card, Muslim Salikov got a very controversial split decision victory in the co-main event. Rose overwhelmed Tracy Cortez. That was one I was definitely wrong on. But Charles Johnson and Andre Petrosky, we had some great wins come through. So that was a good week. And now we're looking to keep it going at UFC Vegas 94. We got 12 fights, and then after this, we got UFC 304, a pay-per-view, but this is a 12-fight card in the UFC Apex this Saturday, kicking off at 5 p.m. We start off with a heavyweight matchup between Muhammad Usman and Thomas Peterson. And so Muhammad Usman is the minus 130 favorite, Peterson the plus 110 underdog. Muhammad Usman, all right, against a lot of odds. Like, for the three guys that he has fought, that he beat, Pauga, who's really a light heavyweight, really. Junior Tafa by unanimous decision in one of the most boring fights I've ever seen with 29 combined strikes. And Muhammad Usman won by unanimous decision with 7 strikes and 2 takedowns. A unanimous decision win over Jake Collier in what was a relatively close fight. And then he is coming off a unanimous decision loss to Mick Parkin, who is now 4-0 in the UFC, counting the Contender Series. So people love to clown on Muhammad Usman. I do too, for some of the wins that he has and how unspectacular of an Ultimate Fighter winner he's looked like. But, for heavyweight, it's not a horrible resume, and this is a big opportunity. Thomas Peterson won on the Contender Series against Chandler Cole by round 2 submission back in August of last year. Has a fight this year. He lost by unanimous decision to Jamal Pogues, getting outstruck 65-58. He did get 1 takedown. Jamal Pogues, he lost to Mick Parkin, and Pogues otherwise has beaten Peterson, Parisian, Paulo Renato. He won twice on the Contender Series. So, and this is a shame because, I don't know, Mick Parkin obviously seems to be better than both of these guys. Muhammad Usman, I think he's going to be a bigger dude I mean, I guess he's not, but he is, he seems like he's bigger, but he's not. He's going to have a 5-inch reach advantage. Peterson, a lot younger, by 6 years, which is, can make a major difference when you were born in 1989. I don't know, man. This is one that, I think that the right answer is Muhammad Usman, because just, comparing resumes as much as you can. But this is too much of a 50-50 fight for me. Thomas Peterson could quite easily win this, being the younger dude, and his only loss being to Jamal Pogues, and there's, nothing to be ashamed of in that. I think if you just don't let Muhammad Usman control you, you're a big dude, don't let him lay on you on the cage, out-volume him in the striking, which I think he can do. Let me look one more time. Peterson landed 58 strikes and a takedown against Pogues. It ended up being 29-28 on 2 of the judges' scorecards. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say go with Thomas Peterson plus 110. I think this is a 50-50 matchup. Hit it. And if I'm going Peterson, I don't know. I think this fight probably goes the distance. I'm not touching either of these guys in DFS, though. I think this could be a sloppy 3-round fight that doesn't end up getting people too excited for what's after. It could be. I hope one of these guys has an impressive win. Heavyweight always needs some people that looking like they're on their way up. And I'd rather that be Peterson since he wasn't born before 1990. Next up, we got a women's flyweight matchup between Luana Carolina and Lucy Pudilova. Pudilova, the minus 108 underdog. Carolina, the minus 112 favorite. Let's start off with Pudilova. And this one's hard to believe. So in 10 UFC fights, she is 3-7. She has lost 6 of her last 7 fights, with the last one being to Yanan Wu. That was her last win, August of 2022. Coming off 2 straight losses, both decisions, to Jocelyn Edwards and Eileen Perez, who thoroughly beat her in those performances. I understand the losses to Lena Landsberg, Irene Aldana, Liz Carmouche, and Tanina Shevchenko even, but against Kish and Jocelyn Edwards and Perez, you got to get one of those if you're going to hang around. And Luana Carolina, I think, is definitely in better position to win this. She's won 4 of her last 6. Wins over Lupe Godinez, Poliana Botello, Ivana Petrovic, and Juliana Stolyarenko. Losses to Joanne Wood. She at least landed 100 strikes. It was a split decision loss. But, those are the fights that Luana Carolina's in. She's in a decent amount of close fights. A lot of fights going to decision. 2 split decisions on her record. She did finish Julia Stolyarenko, though. Why am I talking about this too much further than I need to? I don't understand why this fight is so closely handicapped. Lucy Pudilova.
Don't do this. You cannot do this,
I get not loving Luana Carolina. She actually started off plus 105 here. Lucy Pudilova's last win is August of 2022. Luana Carolina has a win this year. That makes a big difference to me. I don't think this is a 50-50 matchup. I think Luana Carolina wins this fight 60 to 65 times out of 100. If it goes to decision, she's going to have a chance too. It's just one of those fights where even if she's not the rightful victor, Luana Carolina could come out with the win here. So give me minus 112 and Luana Carolina by decision, I think, are the right ways to go. Again, I really don't think that anybody in these first 2 fights is a good play for DFS. Unless they're real low priced, just going with a victor could make sense. Just pick someone you think is going to win. But not a lot of high scoring potential from what I see there. Next up, we got a lightweight matchup between Loic Radzhabov and Trey Ogden. Trey Ogden, the minus 105 underdog, and Loic, the minus 115 favorite. That is 3 very closely handicapped fights to start off this card. Let's start with Loic, winner of 2 of his last 3. A decision in his UFC debut against Esteban Ribovic. He got 11 takedowns in that fight. His second-round knockout loss June of last year was to Matus Rebecki. It's forgivable. And you get a third-round knockout victory to bounce back March of this year at UFC Fight Night. Rozenstruik versus Gaziev knocks out Abdul Karim Al-Sawadi in the 3rd round. 4 takedowns. The striking was pretty close. It was 39-38 in the striking, 4-3 in the takedowns. Trey Ogden, born in 1989. His record is 2-2-1 in the UFC with a no contest over Nicholas Mata, a fight that he was thoroughly winning up to that point. Has wins over Daniel Zellhuber by unanimous decision, and he's coming off a win March of this year by decision over Kurt Holloway, Ultimate Fighter winner Kurt Holloway, and his only losses are to Jordan Leavitt and Ignacio Bahamondes. I think, Trey Ogden has never been taken down in the UFC. Jordan Leavitt had to beat him by outstriking him, which is kind of a problem in itself, I suppose. Loic, showed that he has knockout power against Abdul Karim Al-Sawadi, at least at this level. I'm impressed by the statistical output against Esteban Ribovic. But as a slight underdog, Trey Ogden has proven trustworthy in these situations. He actually started off at plus 120, and people liked him at that. I like Trey Ogden as the minus 105 underdog, too. I think that this fight is kind of close to 50-50. I think Loic has the more impressive resume, even to this point. But we've seen Trey Ogden pull off upsets. He's had to fight tough prospects and just solid fighters, and guys like Jordan Leavitt, who's just, all-around solid. And if Jordan Leavitt's an underdog on any given night, I might like him against who he's matched up with as well. And I think strength-wise, I think that it's going to be really hard to get Ogden down the amount of times that you need. So, Trey Ogden has shown that he can, pile on the volume of striking that he needs. He's just a solid, well-rounded fighter. And in that situation against Loic, I do think that Trey Ogden is live as an underdog, a very slight one at minus 105. This is a really close fight. This is probably the closest out of the first three. I don't know. That Usman-Peterson fight is a doozy. But I will go Ogden minus 105. I'm not going to slap it.
Nick, one comment, man. One comment.
No, don't be scared, homie. Come on.
Yeah, but I'm not going to slap it. Okay. Get some water there. And, DFS-wise, this is getting tricky. I think that maybe these two guys could score a little better than in the first two. Luana Carolina could get some volume striking. If I like anybody so far in DFS, it's Luana and maybe whoever is at a decent price between Loic and Trey Ogden. Whew. This is going to be a hard card. Women's flyweight. Miranda Maverick against Dion Barbosa. Miranda Maverick, the minus 225 favorite. Barbosa, the plus 185 underdog. Miranda Maverick was supposed to fight Tracy Cortez until Cortez was rebooked to fight Rose Namajunas last weekend. Let's start off with Dion Barbosa. Winner of both of her fights in the UFC, to include the Contender Series. She got a round one submission over Rain Guerrero, September of last year, very early in round one. Only 7 strikes were landed, so not a lot happened up to that point. And then a decision win over Anesta Karakaite. I'm going to say Karakaite. Gets outstruck 53-39, gets 2 takedowns to 1, throws up a submission attempt in there, wins by unanimous decision, 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards. Miranda Maverick, born in 1997, winner of 4 of her last 5. She has only lost to good flyweights, Jasmine Jasdavicius, Erin Blanchfield, Macy Barber in the UFC, with wins over Jillian Robertson. Sabina Maza, okay, she subbed her like she should have. A unanimous decision victory over Shanna Young. Submission against Priscilla Cachoeira, and she's coming off a unanimous decision victory February of this year at UFC 298 against Andrea Lee. So if in that fight against Ernesta, to win with that statistical output, 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards, that's a very thin margin. Miranda Maverick has been putting up a better margin of victory against a better class of fighters. It has taken someone who belongs in the rankings at flyweight to be able to beat Miranda Maverick. And she was born in 1997. And, this streak that she's on of 4 of her last 5 goes back to March of 2022. She lost those 2 in a row against Macy Barber and Erin Blanchfield. And otherwise, she keeps stringing, 2 or so wins together. It makes me nervous. She's never had more than 2 wins in a row in the UFC, but this is the right opponent. If it was Tracy Cortez, it'd be another question of whether she could get this 3rd one. But in this replacement, she is in great position to beat Dion Barbosa. I think Miranda Maverick wins this fight probably 80 times out of 100. Minus 225, I think, is actually a really good value. It started off at minus 175. That was a fantastic bargain. And I don't know. I think when it's kind of a split, because we see Miranda Maverick as someone who gets submissions and is crafty on the ground, and she is, but she mostly wins by decision. I think Maverick by decision probably makes the most sense just historically, but I think you're probably going to get a better value on Miranda by submission. I am recording on Wednesday. We don't have all of the method of victory props out, but I think that Miranda by submission is probably going to make plenty of sense against the less experienced Barbosa. Next up, we got a bantamweight matchup between Ultimate Fighter runner-up Cody Gibson and Brian Kelleher. Gibson, the minus 198 favorite. Kelleher, the plus 164 underdog. That's very interesting. Let's start with Kelleher. Because here's the thing about Kelleher. Like, between January of 2020, this is a guy that made fantastic use of the pandemic. Because he won 4 times, or he fought 4 times in 2020, going 3-1 with wins over Ode Osborne, Hunter Azur, and Ray Rodriguez. It's taken a really good class of bantamweight to beat this guy. Even go back to, Montel Jackson or John Lineker, and that was years and years ago. Chito Vera was his first UFC loss. His last 5 losses, Cody Stamann, Ricky Simone, Umar Nurmagomedov, Mario Batista, and Cody Garbrandt. The problem is now, after 2 straight wins over Domingo Pearte and Kevin Kroom from 2021 to 2022, both good wins by unanimous decision, he's now been finished in the first round 3 times in a row. But against Umar Nurmagomedov, Mario Batista, and Cody Garbrandt, and it's like every time that he's lost, and I feel like even when I feel like Brian Kelleher is one of those guys, kind of like Trey Ogden, that just has a good feeling to him when he is the underdog. These 3 losses in a row, I'm sure they've done damage to him. He was born in 1986. Obviously, he's up there in age and has a lot of battles behind him. But that is very interesting because Cody Gibson, all right, in the UFC, over the span of 10 years, because his UFC debut in 2014 to Aljamain Sterling, he's got 1 win out of 6, and it was to Johnny Bedford, June of 2014. Since then, 4 straight losses in the UFC, 2 since he's been, on the Ultimate Fighter finale. He lost that fight to Brad Katona. I thought he did, at least on the judges' scorecards. Brad is really good at doing that. And then he just lost a unanimous decision to Miles Johns March of this year at UFC Fight Night Ribas versus Namajunas. I know that, he was born in 1987. It's not like he's young. Cody Gibson, he's a dog. He had a great run on the Ultimate Fighter. He looked really good in that. It was a close fight with Brad Katona. He's been in some close fights. He's had to fight really tough guys, like Manny Gamburian and Aljamain Sterling. But why am I giving him all the credit over Brian Kelleher? I can't. Brian Kelleher has recorded, I don't know how to count this that quick. 8 wins since Cody Gibson was started in the UFC and got his first win. And he's had to fight guys like Renan Barao, who he beat. I cannot get that down on Brian Kelleher for 3 straight losses to Umar Nurmagomedov, Mario Batista, and Cody Garbrandt, even if he did get finished in the first round. Cody Gibson just has very, very little in his track record to suggest that winning in the UFC is something that he can do, unfortunately. I can't believe it until I see it. Even in the close fights, it's like, these are the ones that have to come out in your favor to hang around here and to be at this level. Brian Kelleher.
Nick, one comment, man. One comment.
No, don't be scared, homie. Come on.
Brian Kelleher is just one of those crafty dudes. All right? Finishes, decisions. He scrambles well. He's an entertaining fighter to watch. I think this is a 50-50 fight. I think Brian Kelleher could even win this 55 to 60 maybe times out of 100. Maybe that's crazy. But to be that close in age, both born in the mid to late 80s, and Brian Kelleher just has that much more experience of winning in the UFC, much more recently. Give me Kelleher plus 164, and that's a DFS play. I think both these guys could be DFS plays because if Gibson beats Kelleher, I think he could be, another finish. But, Kelleher, I think, can win in a variety of ways. I don't think that you need to go with the method of victory there. I think you go Kelleher plus 164. Next up, we got a matchup at featherweight between Jung Young Lee and Hyder Emil. Emil is the plus 164 underdog. Jung Young Lee, the minus 198 favorite. Emil started off at plus 175. Let's start off with Jung Young Lee, winner of 4 in a row at the UFC, counting the road to UFC format where he got 2 first-round finishes over Jai Ben and Liu Kai. In the finale, he beats Yiza by split decision, even though he got taken down 5 times, and they only outstruck him 25-24. And then gets a win in his UFC debut, real UFC debut against Blake Bilder, February of this year at the Dolidze Imavov card, outstriking Bilder 49-19 with 2 takedowns, born in 1995. Hyder Emil, born in 1990. 2 wins in the UFC counting the Contender Series, a unanimous decision over Imra Sonmez, August of last year. Similar kind of thing to Jung Young Lee's win in the finale of Road to UFC, is he only outstruck him 26-22, and he got taken down 5 times. To still get a unanimous decision victory is tough in those circumstances. And then he has a second-round knockout over Fernie Garcia, February of this year. Fernie Garcia, a guy that, I keep giving credit to people for beating, but, he's now taken 4 losses in a row since the Contender Series. I think Jung Young Lee looked a lot better than I thought he would against Blake Bilder. I thought that was kind of an anticlimactic finish to Road to UFC after he glided through the first 2 rounds of that. So it was a really good win against Blake Bilder. Even though, to be fair on that win for him, Blake Bilder has lost 2 in a row, but he did start off his career in the UFC with 2 straight wins, counting the Contender Series. So I think that this makes sense. I mean, Hyder Emil did really destroy Fernie Garcia. If this was plus 225 for Hyder Emil, I would think about it. Right now, I think that the safest bet is Lee minus 198. I think he probably wins this fight 70 times out of 100. He looked like a much improved fighter his last time out. And Hyder Emil, we just have a lesser sample size and a lesser sample to chart that growth. But I think Lee by decision probably makes the most sense. I think if you go Emil, I don't think that you really need to pick a method of victory. I think that this fight maybe goes the distance. I think that they both definitely have finishing potential in them. So I think, both these guys are definitely playable in DFS too. I think this could be a good fight. But yeah, no, I'm very interested in the result. And honestly, I'm rooting for Lee because I want to see Road to UFC products end up having successful runs. Next up, we got a featherweight matchup between Doohoo Choi and Bill Algeo. Where's it at? There we go. Bill Algeo, the minus 170 favorite. Choi, the plus 142 underdog. Let's start with Doohoo Choi. Has not won in the UFC since July of 2016. He started off in the UFC with 3 straight first-round knockouts. Fantastic. And then all of these different gaps of time, unfortunately. 3 straight losses to Cub Swanson, Jeremy Stevens, and Charles Jourdain. Okay. That's a decent slate of opponents. Even though it's kind of when Jeremy Stevens and Cub Swanson's been old for a decade now. So that's a little different. And he's coming off a draw against Kyle Nelson, where he outstruck Kyle Nelson 50-20, but got taken down 5 times. It ends up being a majority decision with 2 judges scoring at 28-28. Bill Algeo, winner of 2 of his last 3, dating back to April of 2023, and has won 4 of his last 6, including wins over Yanderson Brito, Herbert Burns, T.J. Brown, and Alexander Hernandez by unanimous decision last October, outstriking him 110-75 and getting a knockdown in the process. The problem is, Doohoo Choi looked great against Kyle Nelson. Bill Algeo ends up losing in the first round, getting knocked out by Kyle Nelson. I don't want that to be too much of a problem. Like Kyle Nelson is on a 3-fight winning streak now. He was on a 2-fight losing streak when he had that draw with Doo Ho Choi. That was a very uncharacteristic performance for him, where he leaned very heavily on the takedown. We don't see that a lot from him. He can usually keep up good volume striking with his opponents, including, Algea, Fernando Padilla, and Blake Builder. So now he's going to fight Calvin Kattar in September. I think I still have to opt for Bill Algea because his performances against TJ Brown and Alexander Hernandez were too recent and too strong. And you lost that split decision that a lot of people think you won against Andre Fili in the process. And you just get caught against Kyle Nelson. So I think minus 170 is pretty fair. It hasn't moved much since it came out. I think if Doo Ho Choi was at like plus 175 or something like that, I think a lot more about it, honestly, because I do think that both fighters are going to have their moments. I think both could be in danger at times, and I think it's going to be an exciting fight. But I think it's just one that, in terms of mixed martial arts, Algeo is just better suited to win, and I can kind of take, those Kyle Nelson results as kind of like Kyle Nelson's just a really solid, well-rounded dude, but like has some outlier performances, and I think that both these two fighters saw some different ends of that. So I think Bill Algeo wins this fight like 65 times to 70 out of 100. Minus 170, not awesome. I would probably say Algeo... I don't know. I'd probably say Algeo by decision if he doesn't get a submission, and Doo Ho Choi has not been submitted in the UFC. So, I don't know. Excuse me. I think I'd probably go like Algeo by decision. And I'd probably go Choi by decision too. And it comes down to who lands the best strikes. Something like that. I think if any of these two gets if there's a finish here, it's probably like Doo Ho Choi by knockout or Bill Algeo by submission, I think. But I do think that both these guys are playable in DFS. But again, that is like every fight, whether the odds are really close. I think this is just, so far, 12 matchups, other than like Miranda Maverick and Diane Barbosa. That's been the easiest one, personally, for me to call so far. Other than that, these are all razor-thin margins on these matchups. Next up, we got a flyweight fight between Cody Durden and Bruno Silva. Cody Durden is the minus 118 favorite. Bruno Silva, the minus 102 underdog. Let's start off with Cody Durden. All right. This dude, very active on the internet, wants to fight every flyweight that's out there. People want to see him, get good matchups. It's going to be, helpful to get this win here, because he was on a 4-fight winning streak and had won 5 of his 6 fights, starting with Aori K. Lang, with the only losses in his UFC career, by the way, to Jimmy Flick, Muhammad Makayev, and Tajiro Lembenkov, the loss that he's coming off of December of this year. And I think I was even on him as an underdog, and that didn't go well. It was a round 2 submission. It was close enough, throughout the course of the fight. But he was, a good pick against Jake Hadley, August of 2023. He beat Charles Johnson by taking him down 11 times. We just saw Charles Johnson with a devastating uppercut knockout win on Joshua Van. And then wins over Carlos Mata and JP Buys, which mean less to me. But I think this guy's enough. The Hadley and the Johnson wins are definitely decent and very recent enough for me to still think that, Cody Durden is a good fighter and a risk for people at flyweight. And, coming off a loss to Tajiro Lembenkov, I can quite easily forgive it. Bruno Silva, winner of 3 in a row. All right. Wins in that stretch, all inside the distance. Second-round knockout against JP Buys. A first-round knockout over Victor Rodriguez. And a second-round rear naked choke, most recently March of last year, against Tyson Nam. 2 losses in the UFC to Jir Ulanbekov and David Dvorak, both by unanimous decision. He had a good fight against Jir Ulanbekov too, made it the distance. David Dvorak outstruck him 67-45. He did get 3 takedowns in that fight. This is a tough one to call. Like, Bruno Silva has been taken down 5 times by Tajiro Lembekov, and no one else has been able to get him down. Cody Durden, I don't think he's going to knock out Bruno Silva. No one's been able to do that in the UFC. I think that, like, decision is an option, but, like, in the decision wins against his more impressive opponents, Cody Durden has needed at least 4 takedowns, sometimes 11 takedowns. And so I don't know why this has been the case. I do think that Cody Durden has the more impressive wins. Bruno Silva coming off the win against Tyson Nam, that's good. Tyson Nam was born in 1983. So at the start of last year, even, he was still old. Still 40 years old in the UFC. His losses are to good opponents, too. This is another one where I've just got to say, like, I think that this is a 50-50 matchup. And even if I had to say that one fighter is in a better position to win this one, I think stylistically it's a good matchup for Silva. I think it's going to be really hard to take him down that many times, like Cody Durden usually needs to. And, his punches hurt. That it's 2 knockouts of his last 3 wins. Now, both those were in 2021. But he did come back and finish Tyson Nam. So I think that this is very possible a fight that could end up not going the distance. I think that Bruno Silva by submission makes plenty of sense. Durden by decision makes sense too. I think that either of these 2 guys, honestly, on the money line, are good options. Cody Durden started off at minus 150, and it's been on its way down. So Silva minus 102, hit it. The most likely method of victory is probably Durden by submission, followed closely by Silva by submission. And I don't know. I think that both these guys are playable in DFS too. I'd probably lean Silva over Durden, especially since he might end up being cheaper. Might be. Who knows? But that's a good matchup for flyweight. The winner of that one is definitely going to draw a name of interest because there's so many moving pieces at flyweight right now. And we got a lot of prospects on their way up. So I always love seeing movement at flyweight, and these are 2 guys that could get a notable opponent next with a win or a loss. Flyweight, it's not a big crowd there. It's not like there's a ton of people. So either way, there's implications here, and both these guys have been doing good work. Next up, we got a lightweight matchup between Kurt Holobaugh and Kanyan Krzyzewski. Krzyzewski is the minus 130 favorite. Holobaugh, the Ultimate Fighter winner, the plus 110 underdog. Let's start with Kurt Holobaugh. All right. This is another problem with these Ultimate Fighter winners, and Brad Katona has kind of broken that for these guys that were on the comeback. Kurt Holobaugh has fought 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 times in the UFC since January of 2013. He was born September of 1986. He has one overturned no contest against Matt Bessette, July of 2017, that was overturned. So it was a no contest. Losses to Steven Seiler, Pat Healy, Rayoni Barcelo, Shane Burgos, Thiago Moises, and Trey Ogden, most recently, March of 2024. A lot of good names on there, for sure. That's just a lot of not winning, especially when you get a chance against a Steven Seiler back in the day. The one win is against Austin Hubbard in the Ultimate Fighter finale at UFC 292. He beat him by a second-round triangle choke. I do respect Austin Hubbard, in the UFC. If Austin Hubbard was fighting anybody on this card, it's one of those instances where Austin Hubbard, even though he lost that fight to Kurt Holobaugh, I think he's in a better position to win the average UFC fight. Holobaugh coming off that loss to Trey Ogden, that was disappointing. Kainan Krzyzewski, all right, won on the Contender Series with a first-round rear naked choke over Dylan Mantello September of last year, and then got knocked out in the first round against Elvis Brenner November of last year. Brenner, winner of 3 of 4 in the UFC, just came off a loss to Mike Orlby back in May of this year, UFC 301. And let's check on before that. 15-2 as a professional, 33 years old, 9 submissions, 4 knockouts, 2 decisions on his record. He was in Jungle Fight before going to the Contender Series. Not many, victories of note in terms of names. But, I don't know. This is a winnable fight for Kurt Hollabaugh. I do think that. Because who do we see Hollabaugh and all the other Ultimate Fighter guys rip through in the house was those prospects that, they were prospects, but not the highest, the elite, the cream of the crop of the MMA prospect world in that Ultimate Fighter house. Time has passed since then. We're coming up on a year since that Ultimate Fighter finale here in just in about a month. So it's been some time. And he lost since then. Now, but to Trey Ogden, Kyan Krzyzewski, that was an impressive win on the Contender Series, and Elvis Brenner's been on a good run. I like that. I think that doesn't discount Kyan Krzyzewski at all. But it's and he's only 5 years older. Born in 1991. It's not like he's a full decade younger or anything like that. That would be a big difference. This is one where I'm going to go against what is in me, saying to go with the underdog here. Because normally I'd say, I think that Kurt Hollabaugh's experience and craftiness, I think, could be a difference maker here against a guy like Kyan Krzyzewski, who just doesn't strike me as altogether special at 33 years old in the UFC, so fresh and coming off a knockout loss. But I'm just going to say that in all that time, again, the only guys that Kurt Hollabaugh has beaten is guys that were in that Ultimate Fighter house. And that's a weird sample size, especially when you're coming up on 38 years old. You're coming off of a loss. I don't know exactly how. I guess I would probably say, inside the distance makes the most sense, just because that's how the vast majority of his fights have gone. It's hard to finish Kurt Hollabaugh, so I don't think that, if you're not feeling too strongly about it, I don't think it's that worth it. But Krzyzewski minus 130, I think he wins this fight 65 times out of 100. So I think that's probably where I'm leaning. If Kurt Hollabaugh's really cheap, maybe think about him because he tends to, come up with those surprising triangle choke wins and all of that kind of stuff. But, nah, I'm not feeling either of these guys too much. I think I have a lot of questions about this fight. And in that situation, I'm going with the younger guy who hasn't shown, time and again that he's very limited in who he can beat in the UFC. Next up, we got a featherweight matchup between Steve Garcia and Sung-Woo Choi. Choi is the plus 124 underdog, Garcia the minus 148 favorite. Let's talk about Choi first. All right, loser at 3 of his last 4. Dating back to October of 2021. Was super active, in 2021 and 2019 after taking 2020 off. Went on a 3-fight losing streak. 2 finishes to the credit of Alex Caceres, Bruce Leroy, and Michael Trezano, and then loses the split decision to Josh Kulabau. He is coming off a victory by unanimous decision August of last year against Jarno Aarons, outstriking him 56-30. Got a takedown. They each got a knockdown. Other UFC wins against Yusuf Zalal, Suman Mokhtarian, and Julian Erosa, who we just saw get a fantastic win over this weekend. Another underdog pick. Other losses to Gavin Tucker and Movsar Evlov. That was his UFC debut. Steve Garcia, also born in 1992, will actually have a 1-inch reach advantage here at featherweight with a 75-inch reach. 3-fight winning streak, 3 knockouts, winner of 4 of his last 5 against Charlian Taveros. This is a knockout too. Chase Hooper, Shilan Nurdan-Becky, and Melquizael Costa. The only loss in that time was Mamaha Shate by first-round knockout. That's a really tough one. The Chase Hooper win, I'll give you that credit for it. You've been steamrolling through these fighters that you've been matched up with. Every UFC fight that he's had has been a knockout victory. 2 losses against 5 wins. That's a solid run. This is a tough one. Another tough one. That was a good win by Sung-Woo Choi against Jarno Aarons. It was an important one for him to get. Shilan, I guess that win doesn't mean a whole lot to me. That Derek Minner win doesn't count. He's coming off a loss to Marquisio Costa too, who also has not been, super impressive in the UFC. He had that nice win against Austin Lingo where he landed 100 strikes. This is a really tough one to call. He caught Chase Hooper too. Otherwise Chase Hooper would be on a 5-fight winning streak if it wasn't for Steve Garcia. Like, if we're going method of victory, I think what you do is, I think it's a lot clearer that Steve Garcia, wins this by knockout. I think that is very reasonable. That's plus 120. Hit it. It makes it a lot more worth it to bet on Garcia to win. Choi, if I'm picking a method of victory for him, probably by decision. It'd be helpful for him to kind of slow down the pace of the fight a little bit and not let Steve Garcia, land a lot of his best shots. I mean, my God, he had 3 knockdowns against Chase Hooper, so it's much easier said than done. He loads it up, and he doesn't usually let it get to round 3. If he does, that can be your universe. So, Sungwon Choi by decision, I think that's reasonable. Choi plus 124, that's not too bad either, really. Like, Choi by decision is plus 800. That seems kind of nutty. Choi by knockout, that's plus 180. All right, I don't think it's necessarily proven that, like, the only way to beat Steve Garcia is to knock him out, though. If Mahashate was able to do it, but, I mean, Mahashate is coming off another win, too. All of his other wins, though, were by decision. That's a tough one. So, Choi, prop, I do think that this is one worth taking in DFS. I think that Garcia probably is the better option there. I don't think he'll be too pricey. And if he wins, it's going to be by knockout. Choi, it could be a mixture. He could win a decision only landing 50 strikes. And I think that favors him and being able to, find a way to win this. Plus 124 is not bad. And it started off at plus 105. And so people were feeling the opposite. So I don't know. I think it's easier to go with Steve Garcia because he has the more certain method of victory. I think he probably wins this fight like 55 to 60 times, though, out of 100. So I think minus 140 is just a little bit too high for me to like him that much on that one. But that's going to be an exciting fight. That's another good one that, might not catch the attention of too many people leading up to this, because obviously this card is getting dragged for, the quality from top to bottom. But that's going to be a fun fight either way. It's hard to see that not being exciting. And I don't know, I would like to root for Sungwoo Choi in that one. And he has the better, top victories on his resume. Steve Garcia can, kind of hang his hat on that Chase Hooper win. But all those wins being by knockout, I think that makes it a little bit easier to bet and a little bit easier to make your lineups, including Steve Garcia in them. That's a tough one. These are exhausting to think about. Next up, for the co-main event of the evening. We've got a middleweight matchup between Brad Tavares, the plus 136 underdog, against Jung Young Park, the minus 162 favorite. All right, there we go. I can finish now. Brad Tavares, all right, still the winner of 3 of his last 6, dating back to January of 2021. Seems crazy. And, you think about the guys he's had to fight, the guys he's lost to, all right, Israel Adesanya, Edmund Shabazian, Dricus du Plessis, Bruno Silva, and he's coming off a knockout loss in the 3rd round to Gregory Rodriguez in a fight that he was getting thoroughly worked in. It's crazy that he's already fought this year because it seems like just yesterday he fought Chris Weidman and beat him by unanimous decision August of last year at UFC 292. This is a guy that has hovered around the rankings. He did hover around the rankings for a while because of wins over Christoph Jotko and Theos Leites and Elias Theodoro. He has a win over Nate Marquardt back in 2015. This guy's been in the UFC pretty much since 2010, which is unbelievable. And this is a guy that does not get enough credit for that, but born in 1987. And the 3 wins, since January of 2021, Antonio Carlos Jr., Amari Akhmedov, and Chris Weidman. Compared that to the quality of the 3 losses, and that is not that bad. All 3 wins have been by decision. It was a split decision over Amari Akhmedov 3 years ago. Despite outstriking him 84-48 with a knockdown, he did get taken down twice. Jung Young Park, born in 1991. As many of all the good things that I can say about, the redeeming things I can say about Brad Tavares. Jung Young Park, a guy that we always seem to sleep on. He's got 3 UFC losses. 1 in his debut, 1 kind of smack dab in the middle, and 1 is his most recent fight. So lost to Anthony Hernandez in his debut. He got knocked out by RoboCop October of 2021 in the second round. It was kind of close in the striking up till that point. And then he rattles off 4 straight victories. So before his loss to Andre Muniz, December of last year by split decision, who he outstruck 27-14 and got taken down 11 times against. 4 straight wins against Eric Anders, who he landed 105 strikes against. Gets a rear naked choke 3 fights in a row against Joseph Holmes, Dennis T. Llewellyn, and Albert Duraev. Questionable competition for sure. But before that, before the RoboCop loss, 3 wins, all by decision, against Stefan Nchukwi, John Phillips, and Marc-Andre Barriault. Before his Andre Muniz loss, this guy had won 7 of his 8 fights. So, this is a guy that I typically think of as like, oh, he'll take you down a few times, probably land between 50 to 70 strikes, and that's really a compilation of what this guy's done in the UFC. Really, his performances are so all over the place. He landed 10 strikes in a decision victory against John Phillips, who landed 5. And he got 4 takedowns. Against Marc-Andre Barriault back in 2019, outstrikes him 77-51 with 5 takedowns to 0. And he got 3 straight submissions between October 2022 and July of last year. And then he only has losses to, ranking quality middleweights, at least at one time or at the times that he fought them. That's bad news for Brad Tavares. I think you can beat Chris Weidman, a guy that had gone to light heavyweight, and that was a mistake, and he had been out. Chris Weidman had been out to that point, and by the way, coming off that win over Bruno Silva, which is nuts. But, the activity had just had to have been all over the place for Chris Weidman. He had over a 2-year break between Uriah Hall and fighting fighting Brad Tavares. So that win, it shouldn't mean a whole lot anyway for Chris Weidman being born in 1984. But it means even less considering that he was coming off, such a hiatus after such a brutal injury. Jung Young Park, very well could be coming off of 5 straight wins. Even though Andre Muniz had those 11 takedowns, he limited his offense so much that it was a split decision with Jung Young Park only having to land 27 strikes. So, Brad Tavares, who, by the way, has never been submitted in his UFC career, I think Brad Tavares can land some good strikes in this one. And I think that'll stall the offensive game plan of Jung Young Park for a little bit. Ultimately, I think that this is Park's fight to lose. Brad Tavares at his age, Jung Young Park is still a very viable age. No one expects him to make a title run, but these are the fights that are very winnable for him. And this would kind of be getting over the hump a little bit for Park, even though Tavares is at the point that he's at in his career. It would finally get over that hump of anybody with a name that you recognize, Park hasn't been able to beat them. And, that's not fair and even entirely accurate, I guess, counting Eric Anders. But, we know what we kind of think about that win too. That's when we would really hope that he wins if he's going to be getting fights of this caliber. So anyway, what I mean all that to say is I think Jung Young Park is a great value at -162. I think he wins this fight 75 times out of 100. Park by decision, I think, is most reasonable. That's +150. Tavares by decision probably is how, where to go with him too. That's +215. Park by submission, I guess, would be the sleeper, or I guess maybe just Park inside the distance just to cover your bases, and it's +250. I think that's a decent value. if I'm going with anyone here, I'm going with Jung Young Park, and I could see using him in DFS. I don't think, he finds a way to score his points for the most part. And it's never going to be a huge scoring effort, but I think in his wins, the money that you spend on him ends up being pretty worth it. God, that was a tough one. And now, we are to the main event of UFC Vegas 94, a women's strawweight matchup between Amanda Lemos and Virna Jandiroba.
Break out the red panties.
Amanda Lemos, plus 110 underdog. Virna Jandiroba, the minus 130 favorite. So let's start with Amanda Lemos. It's pretty crazy. All right. Amanda Lemos, winner of 3 of her last 4. Winner of 8 of her last 10. And even just going back a little bit, wins over Angela Hill, Michelle Waterson-Gomez, Marina Rodriguez, and Mackenzie Dern. Who are her losses? So she's got won her UFC debut to Leslie Smith. That was now 7 years ago. Her only 2 other losses in that time. April of 2022, gets submitted by Jessica Andrade, former champion Jessica Andrade. And at UFC 292, gets shredded by Zhang Wei Li for the title by unanimous decision. Got outstruck 163-24, taken down 6 times and knocked out, and still, made it the distance. After a thrashing like that, to be able to come back and beat Mackenzie Dern the way that she did, knocking Dern down, taking her down 2-1, surviving any, really stifling the ground game, the offensive ground game of Mackenzie Dern, that was a really impressive win. It's only been good names and only amazing names that have been able to beat her. Virna Jandiroba, on the other hand. 3 losses in her time in the UFC. One to Carla Esparza, very understandable. Mackenzie Dern in 2020. And Amanda Ribas by unanimous decision October of 2021. She is on a 3-fight winning streak, all by unanimous decision against Angela Hill, Marina Rodriguez, and Lupe Godinez. So, Amanda Lemos is someone that I love for her tendency to win a lot of fights inside the distance. In her decision victories, she's done a very good amount of damage. Against Mackenzie Dern, against Angela Hill, both fights that went to the judges' scorecards for Amanda Lemos. She got a knockdown in those fights, even though she wasn't able to finish it. Virna Jandiroba, it was pretty close statistically against Lupe Godinez. It was 29-28 on 2 of the judges' scorecards. It was pretty close against Marina Rodriguez. It was for the 3 takedowns that Virna Jandiroba was able to get that ended up getting her that victory. And against Angela Lee, she got outstruck 21-14 in that fight. She didn't knock Angela Hill down. She needed those 3 takedowns to be able to get that victory. Amanda Ribas outstruck her 88-50. She got a knockdown in that one and still lost the fight. The resume is much more impressive for Amanda Lemos. And if you try to take her down, you're in danger there too. She got Michelle Waterson with a guillotine. And again, I have to go back to it's been a good stretch of fights, and that win over Mackenzie Dern was great. February of this year, UFC 298. The only 2 fighters that have been able to beat Jessica Andrade and Zhang Wei Li, the only 2 fighters that have beaten her are Jessica Andrade and Zhang Wei Li. All right. She went the distance, and she had no business going the distance with Zhang Wei Li for what Wei Li did to her. But she did not get finished nonetheless. And to bounce back from such a tough loss and get a win over Mackenzie Dern was huge. And Virna Jandiroba, I think that, I understand what, this is about. These are 2 fighters born in the late 80s. I get, why she's in this spot. But there's not a win on here that tells me that she's better than Amanda Lemos. The Lupe Godinez fight and the Marina Rodriguez fight told me just, limit those takedowns, hit her hard with your strikes, and you're in good shape. If you take Amanda Lemos down, which, she took Mackenzie Dern down twice. Zhang was able to get her down a bunch. Michelle got her down once, but ended up getting guillotined as a result. Angela Hill got a takedown. No one's ever taken her down more than one time except for Wei Lee. That's going to be a problem. You know, Amanda Lemos is a much more dynamic fighter in this matchup, and I hate to say it, but Virna Jandiroba.
Don't do this. You cannot do this, you know?
I love Amanda Lemos in this spot. I think plus 110 is an incredible value. Hit it really, really hard. And this started off as plus 110, ended up right back where it is now. Lemos is the more likely to win this fight inside the distance, I believe. And Lemos inside the distance is plus 185. I like that. Jandiroba, I think her method of victory is winning this by decision. And, you know, it's like, even if you get outstruck and get knocked down, if she does get, you know, her 2 to 3 takedowns, she might have a chance at this. And Jandiroba by decision is plus 240. That's not horrible. I do really like Amanda Lemos in DFS. I don't know how I feel about Virna Jandiroba. If it's a 5-round fight, and she lands, I mean, she's only landed a combined 63 strikes over her last 2 unanimous decision victories. Go back even further, and it's 77 over 3 fights. And still getting those wins because you got 2 to 3 takedowns in those. So I don't know if I love Jandiroba even across 5 rounds for what her price might end up being. We'll see, though. But anyway, I love Amanda Lemos in this one. Plus 110 doesn't make any sense to me. Folks, that is all 12 fights of UFC Vegas 94. This has been episode 143 of RotoBaller's official MMA podcast. Tap that. Again, follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady. Follow the podcast at Tap That MMA Podcast on YouTube, Facebook, and Spotify. Come out to the RotoBaller MMA Discord on Saturday. Let's talk DFS and gambling on this card. And check out my weekly MMA DFS value articles coming out on Fridays now. And look out for new interlude episodes that are going to be coming out with new football prospects as they're looking for their spot in the world of spring football, arena football, overseas football. We got some of those coming up too. And then UFC 304 next weekend. Folks, thank you so much for listening. Have yourselves a great week. Enjoy the combat sports coming our way from all over the world. Peace.